So with this workshop, what I normally do is I give everybody a circle. So I kind of want you all to imagine this circle. And I ask people to divide that circle up in a pie chart without thinking too hard, looking at what their predominant motivations for being an activist are. And I really like people doing that without thinking particularly hard about it. And the primary reason I think everybody's going to be able to guess, 3 words, for the animals. I mean, that's a fairly standard reason. Most people are into activism for the animals. But we never think beyond, what does for the animals actually mean? And is it actually a little bit human-centric to place ourselves in the position where we're out there doing all of these things for the animals? Is it paternalistic? Is it depriving animals from being the agents of their own liberation? And is there a better way to approach it? Is there a better way to construct that primary reason of animal liberation beyond for the animals? And I think language matters so much. So it might seem like semantics, it might seem like it's nitpicky, but when we say that what we're doing is for the animals, we actually put ourselves in the forefront of the struggle. And I'd like to draw an analogy. Okay, so we might be vegans, we might be activists, but we are still part of the oppressive species when it comes to speciesism. How would it feel in the Black Rights Movement to have white people front and centre saying, I am doing this for people of colour? Or in the feminism movement, how it would feel to have men at the front saying, we are doing this for women, rather than recognising the agency of those oppressed peoples. Is it perhaps better to say we are in solidarity with? Because most of us, whatever background we come from, have an experience of suffering in society, whether it be as women experiencing misogyny, or the LGBTQI plus community experiencing the many expressions of transphobia or homophobia, biphobia. You know, whether it be people of colour, whether it be men being expected to conform to a particular set behaviour. Perhaps we should actually be recognising this commonality of suffering between us and other animals and applying that. I stand in solidarity with animals and I bring them forwards in the struggle, because in society we don't listen to animal voices. We don't listen to the animals themselves. So if we want the broader public to start recognising animals as sentient individuals, why are we speaking on their behalf? Why aren't we putting their voices forwards? And I know it's so difficult because to a certain extent, we kind of have to do that. But there are ways that we can do this. I think the most fundamental way that we can actually project animal voices forward is through sanctuaries. Sanctuaries provide a place for non-human animals to live as autonomously as it is possible in this human-dominated society. And it provides them with a platform to connect with humans who are visiting, and those humans can then see them as someone, not something. So if we want to re-centre animals in the animal rights movement, which we justly should be doing, we need to be supporting our sanctuaries a lot more. And to a certain extent, that might mean your favourite celebrity vegan doesn't get that donation for that month. It's actually a hay driver to sanctuary to keep them afloat. We need to start supporting the sanctuaries. The other thing we can do is analyse what we put on social media, because let's face it, social media is one of the biggest things of the animal rights movement is our biggest tool. We can reach millions of people with the click of a button. What do we put out there on social media? What does it say about our focus? So, I'm actually going to draw on a couple of examples here. Leah will recognise one of them. No, she won't, because she's distracted. Okay, so the way social media works is you click like on something, it's a public post, and it will show up in the newsfeed of your followers, right? So imagine you click like on a post that says something along the lines of, check this website to see what my activism is and what I do and how you can support me. Does that sound like it's got anything to do with animal rights? Is there any mention of other animals? The focus is on the activist. But imagine you click on a post and it comes up in a non-vegan's newsfeed that says, meet the victims. Here are the victims of your egg and bacon. Now that doesn't specifically say animals, but it's pretty bloody obvious who the focus is of that particular post. The animals are front and centre. Whereas in the former example, the activist is front and centre. So, I think Leah does that really well with Meet the Victims, in that it's a clever play on words, but it draws the focus on the individuals who are suffering the most, the actual victims, not the activists. And it is really problematic at the moment just how much on social media is focused on a human who is trying to tell the world about the suffering of non-human animals but never brings the non-human animals forwards. There's two websites that I actually think do it particularly well. One is called Unoffensive Animal / Liberate or Die. Unoffensive Animal are a collective based mainly in Germany, and you will never know who the individuals are. They do a lot of social justice work, animal rights, sabotaging hunt towers. There have been a couple of attacks on empty fur farms, like burning down sheds, but you won't know who did it. And every single issue, social justice issue they post about, it's about the victims in that issue. Whether it be impoverished people, whether it be non-human animals. There's also another fantastic Facebook page called Animal Resistance. They only post the stories where animals are the agents of their own resistance. So it could be as simple as a chimpanzee stockpiling rocks and sticks in their zoo enclosure and waiting for the opportune moment to peg them at people who are visiting. And it has actually been observed at one particular zoo in the States. This one chimpanzee was just getting bloody fed up, and so we did something about it. That is an act of animal resistance. A pig jumping from the top level of a stock truck is an act of animal resistance. A bullfighter being gored to death is an act of resistance by that bull. So why don't we promote these stories more? Get them out there. And it's not a matter of, I know a lot of people do quite enjoy a bullfighter being gored story. I mean, it is quite like, oh, fuck yes. But it's not even about that. It's actually about honouring the animal who has just gone, you know what? Fuck this shit. I don't want to die in this place today. And they do the one thing they can. And even if they die in the struggle, they still resisted. They were a freedom fighter. They were a freedom fighter. We need to honour the freedom fighters, the non-human freedom fighters. Because when we bring them forwards, we change the dialogue in society. We change the dialogue that says animals are passive. We change the dialogue that says animals have no agency, that they have no autonomy. we change the entire conversation. But when we continue to put ourselves first and foremost in the movement, we will not change that dialogue. And we will continue, essentially, to uphold a system of oppression against non-human animals. And that's not what we want, is it? We want the liberation of non-human animals. So the best thing we can do sometimes is to shut up and step back and push them forwards. So when I do this workshop in the full 2.5 hours of endless bloody talking, we analyse ourselves because it seems a bit strange to try to recenter animals by talking about yourself and looking at yourself. But look inwards and see what your motivations for activism are. And sometimes they're not as honourable as you might think, and sometimes you actually miss things that to ignore actually become problematic. Let's face it, it feels good to do good, doesn't it? To get out into the community and to make effective, positive change. It feels good. But a lot of the time, we never ever acknowledge that. And every time I've delivered this workshop, not a single person has written down on that pie chart that it feels good. And when we negate the positivity of what we do, we become martyrs. Long-suffering martyrs to the cause. And that's not helpful. And once again, when we start sitting there going, oh, you would not believe what I have done for non-human animals. Oh, look, I've done and I'm suffering this much for it. We're drawing attention away from the pigs in the sheds. When we focus on one of our activist mates standing out somewhere having a fight, with a worker in the slaughterhouse, and there's cows being slaughtered in the slaughterhouse behind us, but we're looking at the activist who's having an argument. We should be over there, looking at the victims who are dying. We've got to start recognising that we are not martyrs, and it doesn't help to be martyrs. And this is where self-care comes into it, but also care for each other. If we can provide an activist space that is safe for every individual to be a part of, to bring their diverse experiences and ideas to. If we support, love and protect one another, then we actually create a really, really strong movement that is able to put ego aside. I mean, you've got to have a certain level of ego. I mean, let's face it, when you're facing this shit, you do actually need to be a little bit, self-centred, so you can actually look after yourself and be a bit confident. But the more of us that are all together in this, when one of you needs to step out, somebody else can step in a safe, inclusive space. And when that happens, we can actually more effectively support non-human animals in their struggle. We then don't burn out quite so much, because we know there's someone behind us who's going to help. And then you don't have to feel guilty for taking a step back either, because you know somebody will pick it up. So there is so much more I could say on this. I could go on for hours and hours and hours. I could. Kerry knows we've been doing this back in the accommodation, just talking all night. There is a document that I think everybody should have a look at if they can. And you can go to www.consistentantioppression.com. And this is just sort of a guide how to create activism that centres animals and creates safe spaces. And it can be as simple as providing disability access to a vegan event, or making sure that your language is inclusive and isn't oppressive in itself. So instead of calling other animals it, they, he or she, and applying that also to our human colleagues. Because if we're going to show non-human animals a certain level of respect, we need to show up to the person standing next to us as well. So yeah, consistentantioppression.com, and the actual document, it flows through beautifully. Each point just flows into the next one. And I would really recommend people read it, because essentially all of our struggles are interconnected, and we need to recognise that amongst one another. Thank you. I ran a bit quickly then, so if you've got any questions, feel free to hit me with them, but yes.
What's your Instagram so that we can follow?
That feels really weird when I've been saying, look at the animals, here's my Instagram. I guess Liberation _Alger on Instagram. Yeah. Seriously, you just put me right on the spot there.
I think, the message that you share is important, and we want to follow people where we can get some inspiration and a different perspective. So,
it's so important that you use social media, because remember you had that Dominion March speech, and I cried my eyes out. I was like, who is she? And so it really helps to actually, as you know, use social media. I just said, I don't want to talk about it because I started crying, and I was just crying listening to you when you spoke about all of them fighting back.
Oh, just don't you start crying, because then I'll start crying, and that's really fucking ugly. Like, seriously, we don't need that. So,
You should be proud of yourself and not be shy about it.
thank you. And that means a lot, because I've been following what Leah's been doing for a while, and I love how Leah walks that balance between, focusing on the victims, but using yourself to bring the victims forward, and it is possible. I guess when it comes to social media, we like to put photos up on social media of ourselves with animals. Ask yourself before you do that. This is something that somebody brought up with me a while ago. Ask yourself, the photo you're about to put of yourself on social media, is it a photo that you would take if the non-human animal was a human? So it can be and we're talking selfies here, because a lot of, there are a lot of organically taken photos where, there's a photo of me in a duck slaughterhouse at Nil, putting a duck into a paddling pool. I had no idea the photo was being taken. But if I'd been holding the duck in the slaughterhouse going, oh, check me out, oh, look at this duck, that would be a completely different matter. So that's where the critical analysis comes in. Always think, what are you putting out there, and what does it tell people? So yeah, awesome.
there's actually something like that actually came up where a couple of people who I really respect, and they're amazing people and activists, but there was a picture taken with an animal where they were restraining their head and the animal's eyes were fearful, and it actually upset me quite a bit because you can clearly see that the animal's distressed, and they're amazing people as well, but sometimes people just lose themselves and forget that they are the victims and they've gone through enough, and we just need to allow them to express themselves however they want. And at sanctuaries, people force themselves onto other animals, and they may not want that, that contact. Sanctuaries aren't petting zoos.
Exactly, sanctuaries are that animal's home. You wouldn't go into your grandma's home and grab her by the face and go, Grandma, photograph with me. So yeah, in sanctuaries, respect the animal space, but yeah. So I did wrap it up. Oh, you done?
I've got one question. I guess my philosophy, for whoever is into philosophy, I guess I come from a point of, it's polyaxiomatic, so I believe that there's a point of utility and there's a point of a deontological perspective as well, which is the means justifies the end and the ends justifies the means. So I guess for me, if there's a way that you can convey the message of the animals that does come across anthropocentric and that people might come across as it being egotistic, would you say that the consequence would justify the means in getting that point across? So as in, some people would consider it virtue signalling to take a photo with an animal though if people believe in crime and controversy and they believe that they find that intriguing and they're following that, do you believe that you should use that as a vessel and yourself as a vessel to perpetuate the dialogue of speciesism, or would you say that's ineffective?
That's a difficult one because it always depends on context. Yeah, and there are so many varying contexts. So, you could be taking a photo of yourself with your dog. That's your doggo. And if they're sitting next to you and loving you and you're loving them and respecting their space, that's one thing entirely. It's that notion, I don't agree that the ends do justify the means, because there are always consequences outside of that, the ends. So you might, engage in one approach to something, and it has that consequence at the end, that the ends that you were aiming for. But what are the flow-ons from that spark off? Nothing exists in a vacuum. That end point could have so many other facets coming off it that are deeply problematic or ineffective or regressive or take the message, in a completely different direction. I'm not a particularly philosophical person. I'm not even a particularly academic person. But I do think that every situation needs to be assessed individually, in its own context and on its own merits. And that we shouldn't necessarily just jump into things without analysing ourselves and the potential outcomes. So, yeah.
You mentioned before about social media being a really important tool, and I just wondered, because that has changed a lot since it arose and it's become a bit more restricted, those of us who are slow adopters of things, just only learning about it now, the elderly, it's a case of, what is the best way to use social media, do you think, for us? What advice would you give? Particularly in our community, I feel a little bit stymied by certain groups of ours which are not particularly activist friendly, and it's a very big focus on food, which food is a form of activism, but it's a very slow form of activism. And I'm just really interested as to how social media can be an effective tool, and any advice you've got to give on that.
So basically, social media can be restricted by, Facebook or the powers that be, Insta and all of that in itself, or by the group admins, like you were saying. I guess it comes down to just slowly chipping away at it. Just keep going. So I've been an activist in my current form with Animal Liberation Tasmania since 2016. But I've been working really hard in activism before then through rabbit rescue. And basically it has been a progression of over about 7 years to get to the point where people will actually look at my content and respect it and absorb a message from it. Trial and error. And you know what? If a group doesn't want to hear an activist message, you're never going to force them to. So create your own. Or, collaborate with somebody who might have a little bit more influence online to create something new. We should always be in a state of continual creation and renewal and regeneration. And if that means brand new groups that start with 10 people and a year later have 1,000, that's still something really, really valuable. So try not to force it, make it genuine. You don't have to filter everything. Sometimes people like a bit of rawness and realness. Currently with social media, everything is so filtered and happy shiny, and this is me underneath this waterfall giving you a bloody Buddha bowl. It doesn't have to be that. You can be raw, emotive, say fuck. Seriously, I do all the time. I am so... It's shocking. Yeah, drop the C-bomb. Be yourself. You don't need to be packaged like somebody else to get that message across. Because you know what? You've got something unique. Everybody has something unique. Bring that diversity, and we become such a varied and vast group of people that we can't can't be looked at as one sort of homogenised mass and then disregarded. You know, let's all be individual, different, creative. And that also helps bringing the animals to the forefront, because we can also promote that they are individuals, different and unique. Each individual single one, not just species groups, but individual animals. So yeah, be raw, be unique, say fuck. Alright, I think that's, what time is it? 4:33. I think that's about it. So yeah, thank you everyone, and yeah.